Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle Podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we got a great show today. Today, we're going to look at some historical conceptions and misconceptions and knowledge that we're going to pass on to you. And it's going to be a very good time. We're going to laugh a little, talk about some movies that are very important to the history that we're going to talk about as well. However, I can't do this alone. So, as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how you doing today?
Zach, I am fantastic. This is a great day to be doing the podcast thing. I'm excited about today's episode. We have been thinking about doing this for a while. We've got a number of requests to do this topic. So we're going to bring that to you in just a second. First of all, before we go, thank you to our listeners. It is great to have you here. Without you, we would be, it's just be another conversation between me and Zach on the phone. So, as usual, we can be reached at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all sorts of other little potty things on there. Poddy things. They are podcasty things. Podcast on all sorts of podcasty things. All right. If there's a platform we need to be on, let us know and we will figure it out. Hey, if you're new to our podcast, hey, welcome. Thanks for coming. We are seriously sincere when we say we are glad you're here. We're going to ask you to please, hey, give us 4 episodes. All right. And if you do, you'll probably hear something that you like and you feel free to come back for more. We're talking about lots of different things. So something will resonate with you. And remember, tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode. If you're on one of those machines on your phone that's doing the podcasty things for you, then, press that subscribe button. Or you know what they say down south, Zach? They say, mash the button. Right? Mash the subscribe button. And that really helps us out. Give us a 5-star review if you can on Apple Podcasts. That'd be great. Zach, today is a red letter day, a great day to talk about something in the past.
That is correct. Today we were talking about Genghis Khan, the Mongolian Empire, and the European exploration of Asia and the East. So before Marco Polo went east and recorded things about China and what we thought was the East, the Mongols actually had interactions with Western and European people. And then they brought the two worlds together of Europe and Asia. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so our story starts, Zach, with
a sunset over the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, so imagine
fishing on the boat. Okay, no, not really.
Imagine sitting on the beach with your... Okay, so we're going to start the earliest recorded reference in the West to the Mongols, or what are called the Mongols, is in 1238. So that's a long time ago, Zach. This is like the earliest thing we've done since antiquity. This is the earliest part in the Middle Ages. In 1238, there are records that the European merchants that used to regularly travel to England, to Yarmouth on the east coast of England, they used to go there and they used to buy herring. So every spring or whenever herring come into bloom, whatever you do with fish like that, they would have all these fish ready, and the Europeans would come over the channel or whatever the North Sea is, whatever that is. They'd go over there and they'd buy herring and fish. They never came. In 1238, they didn't come. Also in 1238, there is reference to Muslim ambassadors coming to England, Zach. Muslim ambassadors coming to England and to France, pleading for help with the royalty there. All right. And that is an odd thing because at that point in time, the Christian West and the Muslim Middle East were not particularly getting along very well, but they wanted help against a common enemy. And that common enemy was the Mongols. All right. These were, the books say they were a monstrous and inhuman race of men led by a man named Khan. right? And these guys had overrun the Muslim lands southwest of the Ural Mountains, and they were on their way into the Middle East. All right. They were brought in by Genghis Khan. Now, Genghis Khan starts, Zach, even farther back than that. He starts in right around 1200, right?
Yeah, so the early 1200s, maybe like 1197. Dates really don't matter. What matters is when the Europeans are asking for help in this scenario, the Mongols have already risen and established power in Asia and the East.
They have risen up. I'm teasing you again, Zach. Okay, just for you guys who are listening to this regular basis, all right? I get on Zach sometimes for these things, but here's what you got to know. This is a live broadcast, all right? And as such, we're going to say things and we trip over words now and then. This is real-time conversation that you and your friends have over the supper table. If you can come to me and demonstrate that you can talk for 40 minutes without tripping over your words here and there, then bring it on, baby, right? So Zach, rising up, rising up. I don't really care, all right? The Mongols had risen up and became an empire by the early 1200s.
Yeah, exactly. So, before the Mongolian Empire came to power, the Mongolian Empire was separated into tribes and confederations of tribes. So there was, take present-day Mongolia on the map and divide it randomly however you see fit. And there were I believe there were five to seven major confederations of tribes. And think of this like the Articles of Confederation, United States. You had Virginia, you had New York, you had all those, but they were connected because they all were American and part of the United States.
Even those guys had groups, right? You had the New England colonies, and you had the Southern colonies, the Mid-Atlantic colonies, but then they kind of confederated their confederations. So the Mongols were just like the Americans.
Yeah, except way before them. And in Asia. And speaking a different language. Other than that, exactly the same.
Right.
Was one of these confederations decided to take over another confederation. And then they took over more confederations. And eventually, the Mongolian confederations were all under one confederation led by Genghis Khan.
Yeah, so his name was actually Genghis Khan is a title, which means like fierce ruler or really tough guy or a guy you don't want to go against, right? But his real name was Temujin, all right? And he was the first Khan, the first king there of the Mongols, all right? And he, over about 25 years, from about 1200 to his death in 1227, he built the largest empire in history up to that point, right? From China to the Caspian Sea and from Siberia to Northwest India. He ruled all of that, right? In the early 1200s, 1227. Now, this was still 10 years before the West even knew about him in 1238.
Yeah. So you mentioned that was the largest to date. That's also the largest to date today. As a continuous landmass, you can make the argument that the British Empire, when the sun never set on the British Empire and all that stuff.
Yep.
But from a landmass point of view, that's from the eastern coast of Asia to present-day Saudi Arabia. If you're not familiar with geography, Asia is really big. That's a massive amount of landmass. That is bigger than what Alexander the Great was able to curate in his time as a ruler, and is also bigger than the Roman Empire at its height. So there was a lot of land, a lot of people, and a lot of power that this Mongolian Empire created.
Yeah, and this was 1,500 years after Alexander the Great, right? Alexander the Great, early, 300s BC, right?
Yep.
And Khan is here in about 1200 BC, or AD. So that's 1,500 years of stuff going on. Khan consolidates power in Asia, and that is, if you start pulling out the map, and we're going to go through some of these travels and treks that the Westerners do to come to meet the Khan. It is a massive piece of land. It makes Montana look like nothing. Makes Texas look like nothing. This is really monstrous amounts of land out there. So they called Temujin, they called him the Great Khan. right? And he was in charge of a really nasty army. I mean, the army was like it was the
You
Blitz.
described them earlier as monstrous and inhumane men, I believe.
Yeah, that's what Matthew the chronicler called them. They were fierce, they were fast, and they could travel by rotating horses and living off the land 100 miles a day. And if you think about, if you now keep in mind, was that's 100 miles today is nothing because we got like cars and airplanes and trains and stuff. They had horses and feet, and they would walk and ride, but they could go 100 miles a day. That is an incredible distance. If you've ever hiked or backpacked, it is. I mean, doing 10 to 20 miles a day is a lot. These guys were riding like crazy, and they could move the army that fast. And their savagery, Zach, was unparalleled. They had a reputation that preceded them. So they would send these scouts out ahead of them and say, hey, we're the Mongols and we're coming. You got two choices. You can either you can negotiate your surrender and save your village, or you can fight. And eventually word spread and people just conceded. Of course, you would live and your village would stand, but the people who survived were captured as slaves. That's what people did back then. All right. And they were used as soldiers or guides, interpreters, engineers, spies, all sorts of things. Right. And everybody got dragged kicking and screaming into the Mongol Empire.
Yeah, they got pulled into the empire, and the empire got bigger, stronger, more powerful, and they kept moving west. They just kept on going. It was like a wave on the ocean. You're just going to hang out on it and just go.
It was the Mongol tsunami.
Yeah, and this was the early 1200s up until 1227, Genghis Khan's death, and then the Mongolian Empire transferred to one of his sons. And then they run into the Europeans of the West.
Right. So the actual earliest in the West, okay, was contact with Russia. And this, I always think of Russia as being in the East, but Mongolia is even easter than Russia is. So they kind of spread from Central Asia out. They already had gone to the East into China, and they were going west into Russia. And the Mongols battled in 1223. In March of 1223, the Mongol army demanded submission of the locals in Russia. All right. And on the last day of March in 1223, near the Kauka River, you can go look this up. All right. North of the Black Sea, 18,000 Mongols, 18,000 Mongols with 5,000 of their allies crushed 40,000 Russian troops. All right. So the Mongols were outnumbered almost 2-1. And they just crushed the Russians, right? And they slaughtered them, and then they turned around and they went back to Mongolia, right? And then the West didn't hear from them, at least with any fervor until 1238, when the people from the continent didn't go to England, and the Muslims showed up and started asking for help. Okay, as time went on, reports came from the East that these Mongols were in various places, and they would say, "Hey, we saw the Mongols out there, and they were carrying crosses. So we think they're Christians. So that would be good for us in the West," they said, and so maybe that would be good. Maybe we should go, team up with them. That would be a good thing. But this turned out this was all a ruse. Okay, the Mongols had learned, Zach, the legend of Prester John. Do you know who Prester John is?
I do not.
Prester John is a legend that says that there was a great Christian king in the East. All right. And sometimes he's in the East, sometimes he's in Africa. He's in a place where you aren't. Okay. And if you are an army looking for somebody helpful on the other side, then you say, well, maybe that was Prester John. All right. And so the Mongols had heard of the legend of Prester John. And therefore, because of that, they carried these crosses in front of them sometimes when they marched to fool the local Christians into thinking that they were on their side. So Prester John goes way back in the Middle Ages, even earlier than that, way back to 1145. But we're not here for Prester John. That's a whole nother story. There's tons of Prester John stories. You can go look him up. But in 1219, Genghis Khan goes into Persia and start sacking the Middle East. And that's when the Muslims were kind of worried that Prester John was coming, all right, and the Christian East was going to take over the Middle East, and the Christian West would come and squash them. All right. So they were, both the Muslims and the Latins in Europe and in the Middle East were seeing Genghis Khan as Prester John. He wasn't. All right.
He was Genghis Khan.
He was fierce.
And he was ruthless. We've talked about the military, and it's important to note the military you mentioned in the sack of Russia and scaring the Russians. They were a small army, and they were extremely powerful at taking down an army almost twice their size. That's very impressive. What was also very impressive about the Mongolian Empire was very similar to what we've seen in the Greek Empire. And there was this cultivation and this rise of science, art, literature, technology. All of these things rose under this Mongolian Empire because this Mongolian Empire, with its army, was able to protect its people and allow them to have flourish in technology and arts and literature and growth in society that comes from being able to not worry about war and famine.
Yeah, so they were so the armies were out pushing the boundaries of the empire, but back home, they were living high in the hog because their army was just like Rome did well when the armies were far away. The Mongols did well when the Mongolian army was far away. Now, in 1237, back to where we were when the European merchants didn't come to Yarmouth, right? There was a friar named Julian, and he stumbled across the Mongols out in the far eastern parts of Western Europe. Okay, and to him, he was certain that Genghis Khan was not Prester John. To him, the Mongols were simply called the scourge of God. They were so fierce that nobody in the West wanted to deal with them. And between 1237 and 1241, the Mongols went through Russia, Poland, and Hungary, and they wiped out everything. Okay, one chronicler. There's a guy who writes Chronicle, right, Zach? After they routed Silesia, the Mongols had collected 9 sacks full of ears of the defeated armies. All right, so they would take these big bags and they'd cut off the ears of the people they conquered, and they put them in a bag and they'd send them back east as evidence of their victory. So by 1238. The Europeans are starting to feel the hurt. By 1241, the Mongols were marching on the door of Christendom. They were 40 miles from Vienna, Austria in 1241, and they were ready to roll in. But just like in 1223, they turned around and they went back east. All right. So by 1245, so this is like Genghis Khan's been dead 18 years now. But the Mongol army is still going strong. The Mongols are this massive empire to the east. Pope Innocent IV convened a council at Lyon, right? And among the items on the agenda was, quote, a remedy against the Tartars. Now, the Tartars was a name that sometimes they used in the east or in the west for the Mongols, right? So the Pope had this council, and he said, what are we going to do about these guys? Because they were right outside Vienna, and they're going to come rolling in here, and that's going to be bad. A Russian bishop named Peter said the Mongols were encouraging European emissaries to visit and to come pay tribute. Okay, so if you wanted to be on the good side, you would ride up to the Khan and say, "Look, here's $100. Please don't sack my country and my city. I want to be part of your team."
Yeah. So this tribute that was mentioned by the Russian guy was to give money to the Khan in protection of when you go on the Khan's land, which is the massive Mongolian Empire, that you don't die. But yet there still is that fear that you could die because no one really knows who did pay tribute, who didn't pay tribute. If you're going to pay tribute, if you already paid tribute, lots of weird things going on there.
Well, if you pay enough tribute, you get a plaque that you get to carry with you, right? Or a letter you get to carry with you. And as long as the person you meet, the guy who's carrying the big sword, as long as he can read, then you'll be okay.
I got some news for you. I don't know how to read. So,
that is, there's an issue right there. You got to make sure you can read the letter. All right. So Innocent IV right, appoints 3 groups says, you go out this way, you go out that way, you go out that way. You try to find the Mongols, all right? And one group was to go into the Eastern Europe and Russian, into Eastern Europe and the Russian and Eastern steppe and find him in that area, okay? And that is the start of the European exploration of Asia.
Yeah, and this is very important to note. Asia is very big. The Mongolian Empire is very good. So splitting this exploration to like kind of Eastern Europe and like in this like Saudi Arabia, to present day Saudi Arabia, and the other group kind of going north into Russia and down over into present day Mongolia. They didn't know that's where they were exactly going, but it allowed them to cover more land and be able to find out more information on this empire faster.
I keep thinking about that. They say, okay, you go and then come back and tell us what you find. It was like, these days, if we did it, it'd be like, okay, you'll be on your phone and I'll be on my phone and we'll talk and we'll check in every hour to see where we are. And we'll check. Like they just wandered, they just like marched toward the rising sun.
Well, I mean, they had roads. Like it's not like there was dirt everywhere. There were roads. No, they weren't paved. No, they weren't perfect. But they allowed you a general sense of direction of like, hey, I'm in this area. So it wasn't off into the nowhere, but it was off for them into an area they hadn't explored before. And there was fear in that.
There was a lot of fear in that. All right. So the guy who led the mission that eventually found the Khan, right? It wasn't like he was hiding, but for the Europeans, they had to find him. Right, was the guy named John Plano Carpini. Okay. And he was a companion of Zach of St. Francis. He was a Franciscan friar. He was in his 60s. Okay. You're in your 20s. I'm in my 50s. This guy was in his 60s. All right. So he says, the book I'm reading here is The Fourth Part of the World. This is my favorite book by Toby Lester. Okay. It's all about stuff like this. Okay. We feared, he wrote to the Pope upon his return in a report that has come to be known as the History of the Mongols, quote, that we might be killed by the Tartars or other people, or imprisoned for life, or afflicted with hunger, thirst, cold, heat, injuries, or exceeding great trial almost beyond our powers of endurance, all of which, with the exception of death and imprisonment for life, fell to our lot in various ways, and in a much greater degree than we had conceived beforehand. So everything that could go wrong for these guys went wrong for these guys, with the exception of being imprisoned for life and killed.
But out of all the exceptions, those are the ones you want to get. Like, especially when you go into the Mongolian Empire. Like,
yeah, so they wandered. So they left Easter Sunday, 1245, carrying 2 letters from the Pope, right? Because remember, when you travel around there, you got to have some sort of protection for you. All right. And one letter basically said, hey, we are your friends. And the other one said, here's what Christianity is like. And we would like you to be better international neighbors, and we would like you to convert, please. That's the letters from the Pope. The Pope pretty much wrote a letter to Khan, said, we would like you to join our team. All right, and John carried this letter with him to go meet the Khan.
Yeah, so they're traveling across Asia, so that's a difficult, long journey, especially if you're going through Russia. And there's the possibility, if you're going through Russia, of dealing with all types of weird weather conditions. And you're going to Mongolia. If you haven't looked at Mongolia on a map, it might be a smart idea to do so, because they're oddly positioned with weird mountain ranges around them, which means it's really hard to get to, and it's really far away.
And getting there is dangerous. I mean, it's like danger, danger, danger. Okay, so
danger zone.
So one of these letters that was from the Pope said, okay, so here's what it actually said, Zach. Now, this is obviously translated from Latin. It is not without cause that we are driven to express in strong terms our amazement that you, as we have heard, have invaded many countries belonging to the Christians and to others, and are laying them waste in a horrible desolation. Following the example of the King of Peace and desiring that all men should live united in concord in the fear of God, we do admonish, beg, and earnestly beseech all of you that for the future you desist entirely from assaults of this kind, and especially from the persecution of Christians, and that after so many and such grievous offenses, you conciliate by fitting penance the wrath of divine majesty. On this account, we have thought fit to send you our beloved son, Friar John, and his companions bearers of this letter. When you have had profitable discussions with them concerning the aforesaid affairs, especially those pertaining to peace, make fully known to us through these same friars what moved you to destroy other nations and what your intentions are for the future. To me, it's all the Mongols really wanted was a letter that said 2 words.
We give up.
We give up. Yeah, that's 3.
That's 3.
Yeah,
I never said I was good at counting either.
So all they really wanted was unconditional surrender. So John and his buddies are carrying these letters that pretty much don't do what these guys are expecting. All right. And they go through Europe and they leave on Easter Sunday, and it takes them like a long, long time to get through there. It takes them 9 months to get from Lyon to Kiev, right? It's now a 26-hour drive. Zach, I looked it up on the Google map. It's 26 hours to drive it. It took them 9 months to walk it, okay? And 3 weeks after they left Kiev, they were met by Mongol scouts, okay? So John's like, hey, you guys are Mongol scouts? Great. We really want to meet you guys. We have these letters, okay? So John says to them, hey, we are your friends and we want peace. But the Mongols heard the word peace and they were like, oh, that's a great word because that's the word we use for submission, all right?
And
so
surrender.
They were like, we accept your surrender is what they said at that point, all right? And they said, okay, come with us. Hop on these horses and you ride with us. And they had to ride east with the Mongols for another month. And therefore, they're along the Volga River, which is in Russia. They came across the imperial camp of Batu, the grandson of Genghis Khan and the Mongol ruler of Russia and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, so at this time, the Mongolian Empire began splitting a little bit, and there were more factions associated with the empire. The empire was very big. At this time, Genghis Khan has not been with us in a while. He passed in 1227, I believe was the year, or was it
1227? Yeah,
1227. And then with that, as the empire grew and more time was left since Khan died, the empire became, it became polarized. It became different. Closer to Mongolia was still the home in the center, and we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But, up north and in Russia was kind of its own area, and out west in present-day Saudi Arabia and the Middle East was kind of its own other area. There were 3 areas kind of jostling for position. Not necessarily power. That comes a little bit later.
Yeah, so and of course, like any good empire, the guy in charge, when he dies, the kids fight to see who gets what position, right? So they're always at odds with the other, trying to take over. So Genghis Khan dies, and his son is Ogedei, Ogedei, okay? And then his son is was Batu, or was Batu?
Batu was a grandson.
Was a grandson
of Genghis Khan.
Okay,
and his brother, I believe, was Guyuk, who at the time that I believe this European coalition makes its way to the center of the Mongolian Empire, he is the acting Khan.
Yeah, he's going to have the big inauguration is coming up. Okay, so when John meets the Mongols, they tell him, 5 years ago, remember we were getting ready to sack Vienna? The reason we left is because that was when Ogedei had died, and we had to go back to elect the new one. See, so we stopped our war, we went back, had the election, and now we're coming back out here. All right, so that had happened back then, but now there was a new ruler, was this Guyuk guy, he's the next guy. So they're going to have, it's 1246 now, and they're going to have a big party in
Mongolia,
in Karakorum, Mongolia, which is the capital. Okay. So the Mongols make John and his companion ride with them from where they are now, which is on the Volga River, which is a month east of 3 weeks east of Kiev, which is 9 months east of Lyon, right? So they are way out there, and they have to go way out there even further, all right? So they tag along, okay? They are forced, because they submitted, to tag along. They went across Kazakhstan, across the Altai Mountains, Western Mongolia, and into central Mongolia. And then a half day from Karakum, they find this gigantic tent city with dignitaries from all over the world. All right. So they got guys from Russia, from Georgia, from Baghdad, from France, and from Italy. All right. There are Arabs and Asians from all sorts of different tribes. There were 500 carts filled with gold and silver and silk goods. All of this is tribute to the Khan, brought by different people who are paying tribute to the Khan.
Yeah, all these people are coming in and they're paying tribute to this new guy who they don't know who it's going to be, for the sole idea of this guy is going to behave like the ones prior, and if we give him stuff, he'll lay off of us.
Yeah, we'll be
which is a massive, massive bet.
Well, but that's how it always worked, right? I mean, it's a protection racket. Life has always been a protection racket, and he was back in the 1200s. So all these guys have gold and silver and silks, and John and his buddies, what do they have?
They got that letter.
They got a letter, okay, and it's from the Pope. Okay, so they go to the ceremony, and John gives the letter to the Khan, and the response from the Mongols was really, really, it was really harsh. Okay, so he says this: having taken counsel for making peace with us, you, Mr. Pope, he didn't say Mr. Pope, he said you, Pope. You, Pope, and all Christians have sent an envoy to us, and we have heard from him as your letters declare. Wherefore, if you wish to have peace with us, you, Pope, and all kings and potentates, in no way delay to come to me and make terms of peace, and then you shall hear alike our answer and our will. The contents of your letter stated that we ought to be baptized and become Christians. To this we answer briefly that we do not understand in what way we ought to do this. To the rest of the contents of your letters, that you wonder at so great a slaughter of men, especially Christians, and in particular Poles, Moravians, and Hungarians, we likewise reply that we also do not understand, because they did not obey the word of God and the command of Genghis Khan and the Khan. God ordered us to destroy them and give them up into your hands. And if you accept peace and are willing to surrender your fortress to us, you, Pope, and Christian princes, in no way delay in coming to me to conclude peace. But if you should not believe our letter and the command of God, nor hearken to our counsel, then we shall know for certain that you wish to have war. Signed, lovingly, Genghis Khan. Well, it wasn't Genghis Khan. It was his son, Gaya.
His grandson.
Yeah. So there was they weren't taking anything from anybody. All right? No. They were not going to back down.
Yeah. This whole thing is, especially the Europeans who were there in Mongolia and to see the Mongolian Empire, it opened up their eyes and the world to the fact that there was more than just Europe, especially with the amount of spices and gold and fruit and any other things they saw. Was just like, okay, there's possibilities here. And this is very important, because when you see possibilities, these possibilities end up being trades and alliances. And if you have trades and alliances, you can create growth and you can create sustainability for your own empire, whatever it may be, and however small it may be. So some of these Europeans are looking at the Mongolian Empire as an ally that could be useful for trade and protection down the line.
Yeah, so John took this letter back to the Pope, right? Out of Mongolia, across Kazakhstan, across Russia, across Eastern Europe, back into France, and he gets back in 1247, okay? So it was like, hey, John, how's it been? So he walked to Mongolia, met the Khan, and he came back, all right? And then through 1247 and 1248 into the 1250s, reports kept coming in from the East that the Mongols might be convertible. All right. So, that was the big thing in Christendom was to convert folks. I mean, that's, if you believe that your way of life is the salvation of everyone, then you and everybody on your side. Right. All right. So, and if they could be converted, they might be really helpful in taking over the Holy Land, because the Christians and the Muslims have been fighting over that
and the Crusades are a thing while the Mongolian Empire is expanding and taking over half the world.
Right. So in 1253, there was this guy named William of Rubruck, and he set out on a trip to find Sartuk, who was son of Batu, who was a grandson of Genghis Khan, all right, to see if the conversion stories were true, okay? So William goes out there, and he finds this guy Sartuk on the Volga River, all right, but he was anything but a convert. Sartuk captured William and ordered him to go find his father, Batu, right, who was the guy in charge of Russia, if you remember him, All right. And he said, you go find my father because you are carrying a submission letter. And William was like, well, I don't really have a submission letter, but I'll go visit him. Okay. So Batu said to William, he said, you're not of any good to me. I don't believe in your Christianity stuff. I don't believe in fire and brimstone. I don't believe in burn in hell, any of that stuff. So I need you to go meet the new Khan. All right. This was in the 1250s. So you got to go to Karakoram again. So he followed 8 years later. He followed the same path that John had followed. All right. All the way across Asia to the camp. All right. And when he is there, he meets Persians and Turks and Chinese, Armenians, Georgians, Russians, Hungarians, Germans, French, and an Englishman out there in the middle of freaking nowhere in Mongolia. Most of these guys were captives from conquest.
Yeah, and so now the Khan he is meeting is not the same Khan that was met prior, because that Khan only lasted for 2 years. So there's this internal power struggle going on in the Mongolian Empire too, despite the fact of all this wealth and gold and luxury that is seen on the outside to these foreigners who are visiting.
Yeah, so William goes there, meets the Khan, and he takes a letter back to the Pope all the way back. I mean, so the communication here is like a year between sending. You think your text messages are slow sometimes, all right? It's like, hey, Zach, you didn't respond to my text message. Well, like
I was busy hanging out with Genghis Khan.
I was busy walking. I was walking across Asia. All right. So 2 failed attempts to bring the Mongols to Christianity. All right. And to stave off a Mongol question of Europe. Then what? Okay. So the Mongols in conquesting, is that what you do? You conquest? You conquest Central Asia. All right. And that flow of tribute into Central Asia had made the Mongols, Zach, very, very rich. Okay. And they developed a great appetite for luxury goods, the sale of which in turn would make intrepid merchants very rich as well. All right. And like any good capitalist, there were some folks in Europe that decided, hey, I think we should go out there and see what we can buy and sell. So in 1260, right, 2 Venetian merchants in a ship loaded with jewels sailed the Black Sea from Constantinople to a place called Soldaya. And after going ashore in Soldaya, they did something that very few people ever did. They continued north toward the Mongol camp at Volga. And these 2 guys, Nikolai and Mefio Polo, the 2 Venetian merchants, were gone for 9 years amongst the Mongols.
Yeah, so these 2 guys were setting up and putting themselves in position to be successful to reestablish the Silk Road of the Old World. And if you're unfamiliar with this, the Silk Road connected Asia to Europe and allowed this free market of exchange of goods and luxury goods and spices. And if you could find it in China and you couldn't find it in England, you need to know a merchant on the Silk Road to be able to get you that resource and that good. And these guys were starting that back up again. And with the protection of the Mongolian army and Mongolian Empire, they could be successful at it.
Yeah, so they were gone for 9 years, and they reappear in the historical record in 1269 with a gold tablet, Zach, from Kublai Khan, the great Khan of the Tartars. And you may have heard of Kublai Khan from a poem by a guy. Zach, have you ever heard of this poem about Kublai Khan?
No, I have not.
It
would require reading.
Oh, yeah. Okay. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. You've never heard that?
No.
Oh, that's a famous poem from the British, opioid days. It's called "A Vision in a Dream," a fragment. So this guy had this drugged up dream, and he wrote down what he saw, and it had Kublai Khan in it. Go figure.
Nice.
All right. So anyway, these guys have this tablet. All right. And the tablet granted provisions, lodging, and safe passage. It also had a letter from the Khan, right? And it was a letter from Kublai Khan, ruler of Cathay, which is China, all right, addressed to the Pope, but it did not demand submission. Instead, it requested 100 learned Christians to come to the court to argue with the idolaters. He also made a promise, okay? So the great Khan made a promise to the Pope, and he said...
What did he say?
On the day when we see this, I too will condemn the idolaters and their religion. Then I will be baptized, and all my barons and magnates will do likewise, and their subjects in turn will undergo baptism. So there will be more Christians here than there are in your part of the world. So the great Kublai Khan offered, the Pope said, you send 100 people here to argue with these people that are in my court. And if you win the argument, all of China will convert to Christendom.
Seems like a pretty good deal.
See, yeah, if you're the Pope, look at that. Look at what that does to your revenue. All right. It turns out the Pope didn't send the 100 guys. All right. The Polos got an audience with the Pope 2 years later, and Pope Gregory X was very enthusiastic. But he, instead of sending 100 men, he sent 2 Dominican friars.
That's right? 98 less than 100.
Yeah, that's like 2%, right? With plenary authority to ordain priests and bishops and grant absolution as fully as the Pope himself. So that's a lot of power there, okay? And he sent them back to Khan with the Polos, who this time brought along, guess who, Zach?
Marco,
the 17-year-old son of Nicola, okay? Now, unlike John and William, the Dominican friars didn't want to go. So as soon as they left the Pope's house, they were like, okay, you guys are going? Here, we will bequeath on you all of our powers, and anything the Pope said we can do, we will give that to you. You guys go. Right? So the 2 grown-up Polos and Marco take off down the Silk Road on their way to meet the Khans.
Yeah, and this leads us into Marco Polo and his exploration and writing down exploration of Asia, the East, and China, which we will pick up later, which will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that is coming up. The Polos will be gone for 17 years. So this is a long, complicated story, but we have to tell the Mongol story to tell the Marco Polo story, because the Mongols opened up that road and made it safe for travel.
Because without the Mongols empire and without the work done by the previous Polos, Marco Polo would not have been able to go east safely and be able to do what he did and become well known through history. But that is something we will cover on another day.
Yeah, so, Zach, I said he was gone for 17 years. I was wrong. They travel for 3.5 years, and then he stays in the court of the Khan for 17 years. So he's going to be gone like 20 years. He spent his whole formative life after his, he's a junior in high school, right? He was like, no, I'm skipping my senior season. I'm going to go see the Mongols, right? And so he bailed out. That's a, wow. Yeah, go figure. All right, there we are.
We'll explore that soon. So again, thank you to all of our listeners for listening. Reminder to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.